the Vision Resource Global in the last 4 years is we believe that people like yourself are the catalyst for gospel growth throughout different global cities. The city has changed, and I say this from America, living in Chicago for 42 years of my life, that sometimes as Americans, we think it's just us as Americans and everyone else, but as I travel throughout the cities are growing, and you see that full well in Jakarta and other places of the world. We really believe that as we continue to look at what God is doing in major cities, that you as professional leaders and marketplace leaders are going to be the catalyst to what God is going to do in you and through you for the city. We started this Icon Conference and the whole idea of the cohorts, which you're going to hear a little bit more by Grace here in the future. And we start this Icon Conference to really gather people once a year to talk about issues and problems or things that pertain to your Christian life. 3 years ago, we started with the theme of faith and work and how God uses our work and how we are called to be in the corporate world or family business or different places like that. Last year, I heard that we spent some time talking about leadership. I actually could not be here with you last year. I actually was diagnosed with cancer for a whole year. I struggled with cancer, and so now I get a chance to come and join you guys again. And this year, we're going to talk about what it means to love our city, because specifically here in Jakarta. And Jakarta is a unique city. It's a very different city. I come from Chicago, where it's a very different place as well, too. And so a lot of times for us to understand the good, but also some of the problems and areas of improvement for us as we look at the city as well, too. I'd love to introduce Suparno, who many of you are known, is Resource Global actually runs by local leaders. As someone from Chicago who started this vision, I actually don't really have too much power in what goes on. I actually report to the board, which Suparno oversees. And so each one of our global cities has a board that governs and leads us well. Grace Liu is actually our Jakarta city director. And so my job as a person who oversees is to work with Grace, and we report to the board here in Jakarta as well, too. And so Suparno, welcome this morning.
Thank you.
Hey, Suparno, for those who may not know you, can you share a little bit about what you do and what your role here in the city is?
Well, first of all, I find myself in a very vulnerable situation. I would prefer to be back there with 5 other people and with a table in front of me. But I'm Indonesian. I have been living in Jakarta for the last 30 years. I'm in the family business. We do plantation as well as mining. Me and my wife, we also do education from preschools all the way to adult education. My passion, however, is in ministry, building up and discipling young people, and so that they could contribute towards loving our cities.
Got it. Hey, Suparno, as you even look at the city, we're going to spend some time talking about some of the problems, the giants in our city that we have to face, but what gives you hope for the city? You and I have talked about Jakarta has really grown in some very good ways. What are the things that you love about the city that brings you encouragement?
I think the number one word that I could think about our city is that it is vibrant. Don't you think so? Even the traffic jam is vibrant. I mean, if you wake up and you go to the city and the city is empty, how would you feel? You will feel that something is wrong, right? So the traffic jam by itself shows that our city is vibrant, is full of life. And so actually I was told that Jakarta, with 30 million people, is the second biggest megapolitan in the world, just a little bit short of Tokyo. Yeah, so the vibrancy means that we are in a 30 million market. So if anybody has a great idea, they know that there's about 30 million people whose per capita income is greater than those of the whole of Indonesia, and we have a big market here.
Got it, got it. One of the things, your role in the marketplace, like for instance, a lot of times coming from the U.S., one pastor I'm very heavily influenced by is Tim Keller. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Tim. And I've gotten a chance to work with Tim for a number of years. He talks about this whole idea of the gospel ecosystem. That really plays a role where within the gospel ecosystem, no one entity, no one person can do it alone. Here's what I mean by that. Churches and pastors need to learn to work together. No one pastor can do it alone to address the needs of the city. And so in some sense, churches need to work with other churches. Churches need to plant with other churches and plant other churches. But also, churches also need the partnership of nonprofits, or in your words, yaya sons in some way. In some sense, good nonprofits that are really addressing the needs of the city. But not only do you need nonprofits, you need good government sectors, but you also need good marketplace leaders and professional leaders like yourselves in the room. It's when we start using all of our gifts, we start using all of our passions to serve and address the issues of the city, and we start engaging 1% of the city, we start creating a gospel ecosystem. And that's one of the things that we want to make sure. You and I in Suparno are not going to address and take care of all the problems overnight, but are we aware of it and what was one tangible things that we can do? So Suparno, we've talked about the good of the city. Let's talk a little bit about some of the problems and areas. There are some giants that you and I have talked about. One of those is in the area of corruption. How do you see that as one of the areas that's plaguing and addressing the city? I come from Chicago, so we have the same problem here. Yeah.
Actually, the other word I could think about our Jakarta is improving. Yeah. So in matters of like we're having the MRT, we're having the rivers, it's been cleaned up and so forth. So likewise with corruption, Indonesia used to be ranked right at the bottom of Transparency International. Yeah, and over the last 10 years, we have seen steady improvement. Right now, we are probably right in the middle. Well, some people, they are a bit skeptic. They say, yeah, we probably bribe them so that we climb up the ladders. But I could see that things are improving. If you compare, let's say, actually when 1998, probably many of you are still too young to remember 1998, which is about, 20 years ago? Yeah, we have one of the worst economic crises. We have a change of government, and the last time that happens in 1966, I was told that thousands of people died during that time. So when 1998 happens, many people were just saying, oh, Indonesia is going to go down the drain. Yeah, but we've seen a lot of things happening. Because why? Because people have been praying for the country. I know of the National Prayer Network. They have millions of people who covenant to pray for Indonesia. And that's why I see, God's working in this land. Coming back to corruption, there's a lot of issues why corruption is a big problem. When it talks about economic side, you have inefficiency. Let's say if you have two people, one both working for the government, one in the water, providing water, and one providing electricity. Okay? So if the guy who is providing the electricity is very efficient, then nobody needs his help. Whereas if the guy who is providing water, and if the water keeps shutting off, then you call him. When you call him, he comes. He says, how can I help you? And you say, oh, my water is broken down. He said, well, you know what to do. And then when people start giving him money, then after a while, the guy with the electricity living next door to the guy, supplying the water, he said, how come, my salary and his salary is the same? How come he's a lot richer than me? And then he may, after a while, learn the secret is that if you are inefficient, you get the money. And so corruption breeds inefficiency. Corruption breeds inequality. People who are corrupted, they become richer. Corruption breeds, money flows. Money will be out of the country because corrupted money do not stay where they are. And finally, you would have risks as well. Foreign investors, when they look to invest in a country, if the risk is too high due to corruption, they do not want to be there. And the other way to view corruption is from the moral point of view. Yeah, if you see that there's a sense of hopelessness, and many young people, due to corruption, there's a brain drain as well. They say, oh, I cannot be in this country. I cannot work here because the systems are against me, against efficiency. And so you see a lot of young, bright people, leaving the country. The other thing that I wrote here is that corruption doesn't pay people to have integrity. And then finally, corruption it gives people a sense of uncertainties, in the sense that that things can be bribed, things can be bought, so you do not have security. And if you do not have security and you do not know who you can trust, if the people who are in power cannot be trusted, then who can you trust? So corruption is a very deadly phenomena, and that ruins the societies. And so if society can overcome corruption, I think the society is on the right path.
You got it. Hey, Julius, actually, can you do me a favor? Actually, right here on the board, I should have thought that earlier. Can you actually help me write some of the different giants? Oh, Julius, right here. Yeah. Sorry, not Julius, Julius. So, Julius, can you write for the first giant, corruption? And now I'll ask you to write the other ones as well, too. We will do a little exercise. Oh, Julius, the first one is right there. Sure. Yes. We're going to do a little exercise. You see a lot of post-it notes. I'm going to give you a tangible exercise once we look at these 5 giants. The next one is inequality. Can you talk a little bit about that in terms of the next giant?
I think when it comes to inequality, I think Credit Suisse, if I'm not mistaken, actually did a report about various countries, and they find that Indonesia has one of the greatest inequality among wealth. Yeah. They call that the Gini coefficient. So I do not know, I've forgotten the numbers, but it was like the richest 10 people or the richest 1% holds how many percent of the wealth. Yeah. If we could see in Indonesia, that's true. You have 2 classes of people. You have, well, actually 3 to be more exact. You have probably the 0.1%, who holds a lot of wealth. You have the other 10 to 15% middle class, and then you have probably the 80% who are, very near to the poverty. Yeah, and so equality, that's one. And probably when you talk about equality, you could also talk about the minorities, in terms of religion, in terms of race. There's still some inequality there. And so I believe that's one of the giants in our societies. I also listed there's a few other giants. The other giants is, I wrote here, is vulnerability. Yeah. Like I mentioned earlier, the law is still not perfect, or the implementation of the law is, and also sometimes the way the law is drafted is still, there's still some gaps and some inefficiency. And so as a result, we have vulnerabilities. People, like I mentioned earlier, do not know who they can trust. And if the law, basically a society works well if you have the what do you call it? If it is not just a law abiding, but if the law works to protect the people. But many times people feel that the laws are against them. Yeah. And so there probably should be some form of social justice being done to correct some of the laws that we have. So inequality. The third thing I wrote there is poverty. Yeah. Previously, when people ask me what is some of the giants, I would say unemployment. But these days, I feel that employment is under control. That's one of the improvements that the government, the last few governments has done, is that we have managed to tackle unemployment. But there's still a lot of underemployment happening. So like people who work in the farm, they are not working 12 months in a year, but they are working more like 6 months, and they probably works like 4 or 5 hours in a day. So because of that, there's still a degree of poverty. So there are still people who are poor, And if suddenly, if they get sick, they have no recourse, and many times people die because of lack of money. And if there's something happens in their lives, so they would go into debt, and they would get into a lot of problems because of debt. And so effectively, I believe you can put them all together and call that hopelessness. Yeah, people do not know who to turn to, where to turn to. They felt a sense of oppression. And so I believe that's one of the giants in our societies as well. And the wonderful thing is, Jesus has come, to help those who are oppressed. And God has given us a hope and a future. And actually, as I look around here, this 130 people who attended here, this young generation, I'm actually full of hope that our society not only is improving, but it will improve.
You got it. So we have corruption, we have inequality, we have vulnerability, we have poverty, we have hopelessness. Thank you, Suparno. And we are to be students. One of the things I've learned is we are to be students of the city. And each city is very, very different from one another. I come from Chicago. We have our own giants as well, too. Crime and violence and different things like that. But we are to be students of the city. If we are to be students of the city, we have to understand that God actually has had a plan for these, not only now, but way before when Jakarta, Indonesia, was first created. And within that creation, God has a plan of how He wants to redeem that city. But in order for us to be able to be the solution to their redemption, we are to always understand what God is doing, but also what are the problems of those cities as well too. But in order to understand the problem, sometimes when we look at it, we say, wow, it's just too overwhelming. We can't tackle it all at once. And the answer is you actually don't need to tackle it all at once. But what is one tangible thing that you can do? So in some sense, actually, all of you guys have Post-it notes on your tables. As we begin to take a break, our first break, and later on after our first break, we're going to bring in Secretary Steve Preston to really talk with us and share with us. I want you, here's one exercise. You have some pens and Post-it notes. You've seen all of these giants. You've seen corruption, hopelessness, vulnerability, poverty. What is one or two tangible things, tangible and realistic things that you can do to address one of these particular giants? We're not going to do a lot of things. We're not going to change the problem overnight. But what is one or two tangible things as you look at each of the giants that you can realistically do to address these problems? So I want you to spend about 10 minutes just brainstorming and thinking through. And after you're done, I want you to take a break. But before you take a break and grab some coffee, and for some reason, the request was that a lot of people like Cheetos. So there's a lot of Cheetos over there for your break for snacks. But post it on that area within that, and we're going to address it throughout the entire day. And then we're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back in about 15 minutes. How long is the break, Julia? Yep, we're going to take a 20-minute break, but I want you to spend 10 minutes thinking about it, then put it right here, and then let's take a 20-minute break right after that, and then we'll start with Secretary Steve Preston, all right? So 10 minutes, what is one or two realistic things to address the giants in your life?
Before I go, I'd just like to share a little bit. The Bible talks about David being the giant's killer, right? The giant slayer. Yeah, so in our life, there are people who are David, and they act as role model. But then the Bible also speaks about the man of David, the mighty man of David. So it's not just David. You probably feel, I cannot be David, but it's good to know that, God can use everybody. Yeah, and so there are mighty men of David, who helped together with David, helped to slay and to bring back the kingdom during David's time. Okay, so all of us, the hundreds of us here, and that's why I'm filled with hope and promise, is that all of us can do something to slay these giants.